Washington.
Read about the meaning of life? Ever taken an herbal remedy or vitamin C for your cold? Are you noticing how the far out of yesterday has become the mainstream of today? Explore it all with me on Saturday nights.
It's Alternative Talk with Laura Lee, Saturday nights at 9 on Hot Talk 570 KVI.
What our 9-to-5 world. Time to reassess those eternal questions. Who are we? Where did we come from? Where are we going? Time to ponder the human dilemma. Time for deep philosophy and the meeting of minds. This is The Laura Lee Show. And hello, I'm Laura Lee, and thanks for tuning in tonight. Boy, let me tell you what our lineup is like. If I sound a little funny, it's because I'm recovering from some sort of bronchial thing. Don't get me laughing tonight or you'll really hear it. A cold. Let's see. I had my wisdom teeth done, and I had very puffy teeth. I look like a chipmunk all week, but I recovered just in time tonight to be able to talk. So if I sound a little nasally, that's why. Doing my best here. And anyway, I want to tell you what's on our lineup tonight. Bob and Cecilia Dean are here with me in studio. It's going to be like one long party tonight. Ken Carey's going to show up. I read Ken Carey 10 years ago. I think my husband Paul handed me his book, The Starseed Transmissions. Loved it. So I've been a fan of Ken Carey's for a long, long time. Both of us have been, and it's going to be a real treat to finally meet this guy. And also in studio with us will be Sean Morton. He's happened to be in town. All of these folks are in town tonight in Seattle, our point of origin, due to a Whole Life Expo here tonight. So it's going to be a good opportunity to meet some people that I've talked with and have read for a long, long time. Let me tell you about Bob and Cecilia Dean. I met them when Paul and I went to Cody, Wyoming several months ago to a science conference. And I have to tell you, some of the best times that we had was, besides these fascinating speakers, okay, they were good, but also some of the best times we had was when a bunch of us would gather together in one or another's hotel room and talk between sessions and talk and just have some great, great times. So Bob and Cecilia held court in their room for many of those sessions. Welcome, both of you.
Thank you. It's nice to be here.
Good evening. And Cecilia, I'm particularly delighted that you are joining us because I know all too often when you have a husband and wife team, the wife doesn't get to talk. You know, it's always the star will be generally the guy. And I know that you are very much involved with this work in the UFO research that you and Bob have been doing for a long, long time. And so I just want women to have their dues. So
I really appreciate that from you, Laura Lee.
It's never really been a problem with us. Cecilia makes her point quite well whenever she feels like it.
I'm sure she does. She's a feisty one. So, Bob, you have had 27 years of active duty in the Army. You're a retired command sergeant major, 14 years in FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency. And Cecilia, you also work with crisis victims and are now applying this work to people who've experienced UFOs.
That's correct.
Okay, so you've got a long history. Now, besides just the UFO stuff, I understand, Bob, and I'm going to spend some time on this because I've never heard anybody talk about it, the White Lady myth. I'm told that you've been following this White Lady mythology through all the various permutations of it for a long, long time, and I have to hear about that. So we have a couple hours with you tonight, and both of those issues, all of those issues will be on the agenda. But tell me a little bit about your background, both of you, and how you went from A, military, to B, UFOs. Not such a leap.
It's
You have
kind
to
of
be
a
in the right
strange
place
story.
at the right time.
I always say I got into the UFO matter probably through the back door or the side door. I was a professional soldier, Laura, for most of my adult life. 27 years on active duty, and most of those years were in the infantry, special operations, special forces. And I've said repeatedly that I've been places I should not have been and done things I should not have done.
Hey, we all have that in our history.
Well, confession is good for the soul. The point I'm making is that I was a career military type, no nonsense, pragmatic, a crew cut for most of those years. And I was curious about the UFO matter. I was a skeptic, but I was a curious skeptic. But this all changed in 1963 when I was assigned to the Supreme Headquarters Allied Powers Europe in Paris, which was the military arm of NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. And that's when my life took a major turn, because for the first time, I was privy to some private studies, some highly classified research, a study that they conducted and published the final report in 1964 on. And when I saw the thing and I had access to it, it changed my life. Because I realized for the first time that this was not fantasy, this was not science fiction, this was real. And that was the beginning for me. And it launched me on what I call a 30-year synthesis. 64, when I first saw the report. I stayed at SHAPE until 1967. I helped move the headquarters up to Brussels from Paris. But that was the door opening for me that I've never been able to close. And I've spent the last 30 years, over the last 30 years, researching, going into deep research onto this matter to try to determine what's really going on, what's happening here. And Laura, it's a lot more than just the UFO matter.
Tell me.
The UFO is simply the tip of the iceberg.
Okay. We're all suspecting that. What info do you have? How can you start to...
Well, the conclusion of the study in 1964, the title of the study was an assessment, and it had a subtitle of an evaluation of a possible military threat to Allied forces in Europe. It was a military study with a military goal with one specific focus, to determine whether there was a threat to Allied forces in Europe from these objects. Now, these objects had been flying all over Central Europe for years, from the 50s into the 60s. Laura, they're still flying all over the world. And for a long time, the Soviets thought they belonged to us, and for a time, we thought they might be Soviet.
Or the Japanese, or the Fufang, whatever.
Well, here we are, in the middle of the Cold War, looking at each other across the Iron Curtain, fingers on the triggers, thumbs poised above the red buttons, and it was a rather difficult time. We had gotten awfully close to World War III, more times than I would like to admit. And these objects that were appearing in the skies were throwing an extra factor into this. They would fly over in formation, at high altitude, at a high rate of speed, very obviously under intelligent control. And our fighters would go up. The Soviets would send the best fighters they had up. They would fly circles around our kids, make fools out of them. Now, these things were normally roughly 30 meters in diameter. Some were smaller, and some were even more than that. There were a couple we spotted that were over 100 meters in size. They were metallic, they were circular, they were flying at a high altitude, at a high rate of speed, in formation, and making intelligent moves. They would stop on a dime, they would do 90-degree turns at 3,000 and 4,000 miles an hour, things we couldn't even begin to do in 1964, and frankly, things I don't think we could do in 1995. So it was a real problem, and the Air Marshal at the time, Air Marshal Sir Thomas Pike, who was the Deputy Supreme Allied Commander in Europe, he and my boss, excuse me, General Lyman Lemnitzer, who I worked for at the time, General Lemnitzer was known as the SACEUR, the Supreme Allied Commander in Europe. They determined that a study of some kind had to be done for us to come to terms with what was happening here. They started it in 61, they completed it in 64. They concluded that there apparently was not a threat because the technology that these objects were demonstrating were obviously so far beyond anything we had that if they were malevolent or hostile, it would have been over a long time ago.
We all figured that out, too. So we're all wondering, what's the big deal? Why the cover-up? And if it was a policy that made sense 30 years ago, why is it making sense still today? Although it seems like there's a lot of factions now within those government decision-makers that there's...
There always has been.
Yeah, that there's now a lot of disagreement, and some would say, come on, let's get on with the show, let's accept it as a fact, and let's learn what there is to learn.
Laura, it's a much bigger story than that.
Okay, tell us.
One of the reasons,
put it into context,
well,
please.
One of the reasons for the cover-up initially was that a decision was made in the late 40s and early 50s that the American people were simply not prepared, were not able to deal with this kind of a reality. They were simply...
Do you agree with that assessment?
No, I do not agree with that assessment.
Obviously, it's not true today, but back then, did they have a point?
The decision was made by Harry Truman and people like Hoyt Vandenberg that who were familiar with the old Orson Welles War of the Worlds radio show.
Well, look at the movies at that time, all the science fiction movies. Scary aliens. I mean, that was before Spielberg came along with E.T.
But the Cold War was on, and they decided that the American people had not been prepared for this, and so they kept the lid on it. Now, It's more than just UFOs, Laura.
You keep telling me that. What more?
I'll tell you this, frankly, that if it were simply visitation by intelligent life from another planet, they would have probably shared this with us years ago. If it were simple story that we were being visited by someone from another star system, they would have shared this with us a long time ago. It's not just that we're being visited by interplanetary intelligence. We're being visited by interstellar. We apparently are being visited and monitored by some people from other galaxies.
Okay.
And then the real zinger here,
Okay.
the real thing that they hesitate to even talk about, is that we are apparently being visited and having an interrelationship with high intelligence that are multidimensional in their origin.
Well, shamans have been telling us that for years. In fact, they've been...
Well, ancient theologians have been telling us those simple stories for years.
Yeah.
But the reality of it is a lot more than a myth and a legend, you see.
Okay.
Because coming to terms with this reality, you're going to really have to have a change in your worldview. Your paradigm.
Notions of reality are
Your paradigm will
subject
shift.
to change.
We're dealing with intelligences, multidimensional intelligence, that could be more than 1 million years ahead of us. We're dealing with intelligences, Laura, that apparently, and we have evidence to support this, that can indeed manipulate matter and time. And when our scientists and military guys really came to terms with this, they didn't know how to tell you that. They didn't know how to share that with you. Because as the SHAPE study in 1964 said, it did not merely deal with economic factors, sociological, psychological. There was a theological component. And that's one of the reasons why the lid has been kept down solidly on it for so long. Because when the truth of this all comes out, it's going to shake up the world. And, of course, I'm eager to see that. I'm waiting for it to happen. I think it's overdue. And I must tell you that the American people, in my opinion, are much smarter than their government gives them credit for.
Oh, yes. In fact, what I'd like to know is, are you ready for it? And does the news of other dimensions, higher dimensions, is that a surprise, or didn't you already know that? I'd like to hear from you about that. Why don't you, Bob and Cecilia Dean, let's open up the phones and get a little reaction from our audience.
Actually, I would like that very much.
And I know, Cecilia, you're dealing with a traumatic response.
That's right.
But I think most of them are going, you know, it's more traumatic to have the truth kept from us. It's more traumatic to have a government lie to us. It's more traumatic to know something and be told that you're crazy when you've got this cognitive dissonance that results. Either you decide, I'm not crazy, the establishment views are, and rather than the other way around. So I think it's less traumatic to say, okay, I can deal with whatever the reality is. I knew that anyway. And we'll take a break, and go ahead and call us in and tell us if you're ready for this. I think you are. I'm Laura Lee, and we'll be right back with Bob and Cecilia Dean.
Based on photographs of the so-called face on Mars taken by the 1976 Viking Mars mission, Stanley V. McDaniel, professor emeritus and former chairman of the Department of Philosophy at Sonoma State University, prepared a scientific paper on the failure of executive, congressional, and scientific responsibility in setting mission priorities for NASA's Mars exploration program. This important document, titled the McDaniels Report, makes a well-documented quote-by-quote and letter-by-letter case that NASA chose scientifically inappropriate response to the issue of Martian anomalies and the testing of the hypothesis that they may be artifacts. And now the McDaniels Report can be yours for $19.95. To order, call 1-800-243-1438. Has NASA been giving the public false or misleading information regarding the Cydonia region on Mars? Decide for yourself when you see the evidence in the McDaniel Report. 175 pages for $19.95. 1-800-243-1438.
Our phone numbers to get on the air at the Laura Lee Show. 1-800-BOB and Cecilia Dean. By the way, they have a video. It's a 2-hour video where Bob has an hour of a lecture and then an hour of slides with commentary. That video is available, and if you want to call our 800 number, 1-800-243-1438, we have it there, and you can order it. It's $27, 2-hour video. Now, let's... Pardon? Oh, the title, UFOs, the History, the Reality, and the Future. Good title. Let's go to the phone calls. The issue is, are you prepared for news that there are indeed higher dimensional beings, not just interplanetary, not just interstellar, not just intergalactic, but higher dimensional beings? And they're here, they're monitoring us, they've been interacting with human beings for how long?
Thousands of years.
The
historical evidence is overwhelming.
We just had Zechariah Sitchin in, we just had William Bramley in, and their books are available here, too, at this show, by the way. So there's lots of documentation for that interaction for thousands and thousands of years. We're getting your reaction. How are you responding? Cecilia is also going to make some notes here on trauma as we get into the calls. Let's start with Ann, calling from Keglo. That's in San Luis Obispo, California. Hi, Ann. Thanks for joining us.
Hi. How you doing?
Good, thanks.
Hey, listen.
Hey, I'm ready for higher dimensional beings. I know that they're there.
My joke, play on words, when I heard what Mr. Dean was saying was, praise the Lord. And I'm making kind of sort of a joke because he's right. It does change the whole theology belief that we have in Christ, in God, who made us, where we came from, and the whole bit. And I, for one, am not afraid. I am totally jazzed.
Totally jazzed.
Totally jazzed, yes, because it's higher consciousness. It's more a reality than this life here on this earth, this reality, okay? My question...
I think we're graduating, isn't it?
Yes. It's like an evolution of the mind.
And I think we're going to discover that we also are higher dimensional beings. We're just waking up to that fact. It's
yes.
just, open.
Yes, I do believe that. My question is kind of off just a little bit. I wanted to know if Mr. Dean is even familiar with the book Out There by Howard Blum.
Oh, yes, I have that in my collection.
I just happened to pick it up at the library, and I'm reading at the back of it where it's the secret documents and the whole bit of the Roswell incident, all right?
Mm-hmm.
And they're saying that these secret documents are saying that it actually happened in the rest. My question is, am I out of step with everything? Where have I been? Because there was a movie on that was purporting that, yes, it happened, but we couldn't get any information from the military. And yet this book here is saying that this reporter, Howard Blum, is saying that he was able to get the information. So my question is this person believable? Is this reporter believable? You know, in what he's put out there and everything.
I have a lot of respect for Bloom. I liked the book. I was a little disappointed in that it didn't do what I had hoped it would do. He touched only the tip of the iceberg, literally. But he did touch upon the fact that there is some facts, there's some reality here. There are government operations in Washington, interagency, inter-operational agencies that are involved in this thing right up to their ears. And I guess I had expected more out of his book, and I'm hopeful that maybe he'll come up with something else.
With something more.
But there are other books out there that are excellent, and my God, the material that's available. I always recommend Timothy Good's outstanding book titled Above Top Secret. I recommend that for anyone to really get into the
I believe I have that one here as well.
And that's beautiful. And
let's get a book list from you, and we can offer that as well. If people want to send us a self-addressed stamp envelope, we'll get the whole list, and people can start collecting in their library.
Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. I appreciate the call. Let's go next to Mitch calling in. Hi, Mitch. Thanks for joining us with Bob and Cecilia Dean on the Laura Lee Show.
Yeah, thank you. Hi, Laura.
Hi.
I just got back from the expo, and it's just fascinating to have everything right here in our own backyard. I hope to maybe even run into you tomorrow.
Oh, yes, I'm going to go down there and say hi to a bunch of folks.
Right. It's really neat. It's as large as it is. It feels
good.
Kind of like
your opinion on. Are you ready for higher dimensional beings?
Yes. As a matter of fact, I want to pose this question to Bob. You know, there's thoughts out there that go all the way from Bob Bramley, who thinks that we're the lowest vibration scum slave on the earth. At least that's what I got out of his seminar. That we were about to
to what?
To the other thought of like actually what you had said, Laura, last week or so, that we are actually maybe of the highest vibration, and that the UFOs and aliens and all that, in some way, kind of like what the angels are here, to assist us.
I never said that. That's not my opinion.
Okay,
I just
sorry.
think that we are higher dimensional beings, and we're going to wake up to the fact. I don't know. I don't like to put on the hierarchy. Who knows who's where? I just know that there's more out there, and we're ready for it.
Yeah, okay. So my question to Bob would be, where does he see how all this fits in as far as our own evolution? And if you want to, it's hard to get around this thing of hierarchy or so forth. It borders on spiritual arrogance, I suppose. But I'm just curious of how he sees how this fits. Bob?
Well, it's a good question, and I'll give you the best answer I can. I'm very hopeful about this. I'm very optimistic about the future. I think the human race is a rather special race. I've concluded over years of research that we are indeed a seeded race here. We have been seeded on this planet. We have been genetically manipulated continually for thousands of years, and I think we have an incredible future.
And we'll talk more about that, your optimism, your fears. As we go, we're talking about, Bob is saying that all his years in the military and Cecilia working with crisis management and trauma, they're saying a lot of the time that they have been covering up this reality. The government knew this for 40, 50 years now.
Mm-hmm.
They're saying we weren't ready to know. I guess they weren't ready to know. They're saying not just beings flying around in this dimension do we have come visiting us from many civilizations, very high tech, not just in the present, but thousands of years. Hey, we knew that. We've been talking about it on this show for a long, long time. But higher dimensional beings from other dimensions. Of course, that gets into issues of the soul, ancient wisdom, theology, all those issues. The whole nature of reality. I guess if that were true, we'd have to let go of our material death grip that we have on our views of reality. It's going to necessitate some immense change, and I think that change is happening anyway. So this confirmation of UFOs and the full scope of it would just be a confirmation, not a revelation, wouldn't it? Revelation is already happening, in my opinion. What's yours? Let's go back to the telephone and find out. We'll take next call from Alex. Hello, Alex.
Hi, Laura.
Hi.
Hi. Well, you might have expected me to call.
Of course. This is right up your territory.
Bob?
Yes.
I have a videotape of an interview done of you for a video that was released in Japan called They're Here.
Oh, my.
By Obvious Productions.
Yes, and I'm very disappointed with that video. That was put together a number of years ago, and the final product was not something that either Cecilia or I were terribly happy about.
He does have a video he is happy with. Anyway, continue.
Anyway, I thought that your interview was quite excellent.
Well, thank you.
One of the definite high points of that video.
Thanks very much.
I'm calling because, first off, Laura?
Yeah.
The Day the Earth Stood Still and The Mysterious Venusian are two videos that come from the period of the early 50s that put a very positive spin and connection with the spiritual that Bob is making. Both of those films were starred in by Patricia Neal, and one of them was written by Desmond Leslie. The Mysterious Venusian, you may be familiar with it or may not be.
Oh, yes. Mm-hmm.
And that Desmond Leslie was co-author of The Flying Saucers Have Landed with George Adamski.
I remember.
And that puts a very positive spin on it and makes the definite spiritual connection. And if anybody wants to go rent those two films, and they're both available to rent, they'll see exactly what Bob Dean is talking about in a physical form.
The Day the Earth Stood Still is a literal classic. It's outstanding. It's
Absolutely.
as good today as it was when it was released.
And I was pleased to see that there is an excellent production of it available, both the current reproduction of it in the sense of it's being restored on even Laserdisc.
Mm-hmm.
And The Mysterious Venusian is out there in video stores as well?
That's correct.
Oh, I'm going to have to go check that one out. That one I have not seen.
Now, the other thing is Timothy Good, of whom you speak highly, he was a strong supporter and even wrote a history of Adamski that was published in Britain.
Yes, I remember.
So what we have
He
here...
and Lou Zinstad worked together on a book about George that was excellent.
What's your
Okay.
feeling about George Adamski, Bob?
I was on her program a couple of weekends
You were on
ago.
Lou's program?
No, I was on Laura's.
This program.
Oh, this one, yeah.
Yes. And I wanted to make these points because if you go into those, there's one other film, and if you watch it very carefully, the points that are made in Forbidden Planet.
Forbidden Planet. Oh, yes. A classic as well.
Absolutely.
Okay.
The messages are out there, and Bob, I want to tell you that I hope that are you going to be at the expo tomorrow?
Oh, yeah, I've been there for 2 days, and I'll be there until Monday.
All right. So you can go
Okay.
see him then. Alex, thank you for the comments. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Let's go next to Donnie. Donnie's in Tacoma, Washington. Hi.
Hi, how you doing?
Doing good.
I've got a couple comments on this. I've, I remember back in grade school or junior high, wherever, they told us that there was all these stars in the sky. They're basically like our sun, and some possibly have planets revolving around them. Well, from that day on, I've never really been a big believer in God. I've thought that, possibly that we were put here even by aliens. I'd like to know what Bob's theory is on that.
Well, first of all, they don't have to be mutually exclusive, but go ahead, Bob.
Well, I must tell you that in the beginning of my research, I was interested in the hardware side of things. I was interested in who they were, why were they here, where were they from, and what was that all about. And after 30 years of a synthesis that I've been working on, I've concluded that the real issue here is not who our friends are from, who they are, or where they're from. The real issue here is who we are, where we came from, how we came to be here, and where are we going. And it's a spiritual issue. 90% of this thing, in my view, is a spiritual component. I think it goes far beyond the hardware. It goes far beyond the fact that we're being visited. It goes far beyond the fact that, as I have concluded, we've had an intimate interrelationship with them for thousands of years. I don't know that I can say that I have reached any definite conclusions about God. I do know this, that I am more spiritually focused and more spiritually oriented as a result of this 30-year research than I have ever been before in my life. I must say to you that this reality and what it means transcends religion, goes beyond Christianity, it goes beyond Islam, it goes beyond Buddhism, Hinduism, it goes to pure spirit. And that, I think, is the essential point here, that every human on this planet is part of that greater, more beautiful spirit. And
Exactly.
I think we're infinite beings, and I think we have an incredible future, and I suspect that there is some intelligence out there that's behind all of this. Now, whether you want to call that God, it doesn't matter. But I believe that it's real. I know that it's real.
Now, then, another comment on that. Now, do you think that's maybe possibly why the government's keeping that from us, because of what it's going to do to the religious community of the country?
My God, yes. Your point's well taken. When this reality all begins to come out, this phenomenon is going to bring about a paradigm shift that's going to be cataclysmic. I honestly believe that most of the world's organized religions will collapse.
Exactly, that's my feeling.
They'll crumble around their knees in ruins. And I'll be very blunt and outspoken here. I think it's time that it happens. Matter of fact, I believe it's overdue. I think the people on this planet will be ready for it.
Yeah, I believe it's time to realize.
And I believe we'll build something much better out of the ruins of what we've had.
I see more gentle transformation. A religion could come and say, hey, see, folks, what we've been talking about all along, the spirit, the eternal spirit. It's true. You could have that reaction as well. Donnie, thank you. Let's check in next with David. Hi, David. Thanks for calling.
Hello, Laura.
Hi there.
Good evening, Ed. How are you doing?
Doing good.
Okay, I'm in Seattle here. Listening to your guest, and I have to say I agree with what he just said about spirituality and such. I'd like to play just the devil's advocate for just a moment. As a student of mysticism, I have the general idea or feeling within me after reading lots and lots about the UFO phenomena. There's a possibility that this might be something that could raise the consciousness of man. However, if that is what it is, if it becomes something that's maybe perhaps spiritual, I think we're going to see an awful lot of casualties. That means human casualties.
Cecilia has some comments on this. Let's hear from you on that, Cecilia.
Yeah, I quite agree with that. I think that people who have been involved with this phenomena, who have been doing their homework and who have been studying with us all along, are less likely to suffer trauma.
Yes.
However, I think there are an awful lot of people out there who have never even heard of the reality of UFOs and still think of it as something that the tabloids talk about. It's all of those people who are going to really suffer.
Yes.
I do believe that they will have a traumatic reaction, And in fact, that's one of the reasons that I've been developing a trauma response program that can be taught. It'd be a portable program.
Yes.
And in fact, I've been looking for people, for volunteers who are interested in getting training in this area, in this arena, so that they can become crisis responders when this phenomena becomes worldwide, when we actually, for lack of a better term, we pull the lid off of the secrecy.
Yes. Mystics,
I just want to say, if anyone wants to know about Cecilia's program, mention that when you call us, and we'll put your name on a list and your phone number, and we'll give that list to Cecelia.
Okay.
Go ahead.
It seems that as a student of mysticism, again, I've noticed that we work real hard to raise our conscious levels, and it's a very difficult thing because of the fact that no two human beings are alike. In facial features, the type of body they occupy, various parts of
We're as
our
unique
makeup.
as snowflakes.
Yes, and consequently, our levels of consciousness, levels of awareness are all like multi-layered. Some people are more advanced and some are less advanced.
And your point now?
The thing that's frightening is the fact that there are going to be many people who are going to be kind of traumatized if something like this was to burst out into the open. So I'm wondering if what's going on in the UFO phenomena is being gradually leaked to the public, like via movies and printed material. Is this something that anybody knows is going on, or is this...
Look around. I think it's going on.
I think they're very perceptive, yes.
It appears to be taking place to gradually shift our minds so that we will accept something when it hits. But nevertheless, when it still hits, it's going to be very severe, I think.
Thank you for that observation.
Okay.
Cecilia's agreeing with you wholeheartedly.
Right.
Could you delineate some of the stress? What are some of the traumas that ensue?
Well, for example, there are some problems with people who first of all have had an experience or a close encounter, or have had even an event as simple as watching something on television, and all of a sudden they're keyed into an emotion that they didn't know that they had.
Okay.
So first of all, there is an emotional reaction, and the emotional reactions go through a variety of emotions. They can be anywhere from fear to anger, to depression, to elements of being lied to, of losing a belief system that they thought that they were safe in. So you will see a lot of elements of the grieving process.
I see.
And
you're grieving an old state of mind that you can no longer hold on to.
That's right. That's right. Okay. So part of the crisis response training program that I have been developing will include helping people work through that kind of a grieving process, helping them cope with whatever experience that either they just had or are remembering, and then helping them to cope so that they can face whatever is next, either the next day or the next week, but to get them through, move them through to get to coping.
And say there's a support system out here. There's a lot of other belief systems that are even user-friendly for UFOs.
That's right.
And it's not scary. It's fun. It's exhilarating. It's an aha experience. Like you're gonna have a series of them. This is just the first. Get ready for the next one.
That's right. Now, your listeners are probably more prepared than anybody else in the world is going to be for this kind of shift. This kind of not just a paradigm shift, but we're moving into something so vastly different from what we know today.
Aren't we ready for it? I look around at this old reality and going, it's time. It's worn thin. Let's get on to the next one.
Some are ready, but not everyone. There will be wreckage along the way, I'm sorry to say.
But it's a choice. It's a matter of choice, right? Ride the wave or get pummeled under it.
Laura, one of the reasons I speak out so bluntly about what I'm doing is that I fault my government for not trying hard enough and starting early enough to inform and educate people to this reality. They tried to keep the lid on it for so long. They lied to us for so long. They gave us so much garbage and disinformation about this. And now we're running out of time. This reality is going to impact the people on this planet within the next 5 years. And our government has not done enough.
I have 2 comments. One is, you're a military man, and so I know that you have a fondness for the military and the government here. Most of us do not. Most of us say, we don't need the government to tell us what to do, to babysit us, to spoon-feed us our dose of reality. We can figure it out on our own. That's what mankind has been doing for a long, long time. Each of us need to figure it out for ourselves.
Well, that's true.
And the second one is, when you say impact in 5 years, the crescendo of the paradigm shift that's ongoing, or is there going to be some event that's going
There's
to trigger
going to be some events within the next 2 to 3 years that are going to be overwhelming.
And we'll get to that just after this. I'm Laura Lee with Bob and Cecilia Dean.
Psychological archaeology is what Dr. Felicitas Goodman calls her work in tracing the roots of some of our most ancient myths, back to the hunter-gatherers, back to the visionary...
Call our order line number, and we have Marilyn there tonight, and she will take down your name and phone number. At that time, you can also, if you'd like, order Bob's video, UFOs, the History, the Reality, and the Future, $27, 2-hour video. You can order any of the other books and items that you hear about on the show or from previous guests. And that number is 1-800-243-1438. 1-800-243-1438. Now, if you'd like to talk to Bob and Cecilia, that's when you call Paul, and that number is 1-800-800-5287. If you're here in Seattle, you can use our local line, or if you're in Canada, where 800... We're making the very fine point that there's only one institution that has taken upon themselves to educate people, to prepare them for new realities. And while we were wondering, what is that institution? Why don't you tell us? I thought it was a brilliant insight. Actually, Paul, we need Cecilia's mic up. Thank you.
As I was telling Laura Lee just minutes ago, that I really want to speak on behalf of the individuals out there who will, in fact, feel traumatized. And I believe that will happen. We are going to have that problem, and we do need to be prepared for it. Because at this point, there's only one institution who has taken responsibility for doing any kind of educating, training, mind expansion, preparation of any sort, and that's the entertainment industry.
And you know why, Cecilia? Because they answer to the public's needs. They have to maintain their bottom line.
Now, whether they do it...
If they make movies that people don't want to see, or television shows we're not interested in, we're not going to watch them.
That's right.
And they're going to die away.
That's right.
So they're always looking at what do people want.
Yes,
They've got their finger on the pulse by economic necessity.
Exactly. Exactly. So at this
Which only confirms that we are more ready than they think, the rest of the institutions think.
So the point that I'm making here is that we need to be much more demanding of the other institutions in our lives. For example, the academic institution, the university institutions, the educational institution as a whole, our governmental institutions. There are no other national institutions who have taken on this massive responsibility of preparing us as a population for this shift, for this change, and for this reality.
It's gross negligence is what it is. But I'm pretty blunt outspoken about that sort of thing.
From our perspective, Bob, but I mean from their own perspective, I guess people do what they think to be right given their own particular perspective. Let's go back to the telephones and go next to Richard calling us on the Laura Lee Show. Hi, Richard.
Hi there. I just want to comment that in order to understand the government's position on all this stuff, you need to understand that government and organized religion and business are all basically one and the same thing. They're all businesses, and they proceed from a position of extreme weakness. They have to convince people of a belief system. They have to, well, in many cases, they just simply deceive people into believing a lot of things which aren't, maybe they're true, maybe they're not true, but it's a belief system which isn't carved in stone. It's in the person's mind, and their power and everything is derived from being able to convince people of this belief system. And if you challenge that with something like, for example, what you're talking about there, that say that there are higher powers around or whatever, why they're going to resist that challenge with everything they've got, because their existence and their power and everything derives from maintaining a status quo. It's like any other bureaucracy. It's just...
Thank you, Richard. That's a good point. Your comments, Bob and Cecilia.
Well, Richard, I'm glad that you're raising that point. It's interesting that you have noticed this at this point in time, because indeed our institutions, governmental, otherwise, are taking the lead right now in trying to affect some changes, but they're doing it much too slowly.
Down the hatches, either.
It's too slow. I mean, people right now need more information more quickly. We need to be better informed. We need to be told the truth.
And talk radio is just one of the institutions coming to the rescue here, folks. Thank you, Richard. Let's talk next to Chris. Hi, Chris.
Hi, Laura. This is a question for Bob, and I'm asking this primarily because of his military background and obviously because he has an open mind. I'd like to hear what his spin is on the, and I hope this isn't too far off of what you're talking about, but the cattle mutilations. I first heard about this, I think, in '73, and the black helicopters, and I think things like Special Forces medic first aid kits found on the scene. What does he have to say about this? Is it like a satanic thing? Is it alien tissue harvesting? Or some kind of covert military operation?
Well, you ask a very interesting question here. And all I can give you is my opinion of some years of research.
Okay.
I think the cattle mutilation issue is basically an alien phenomenon. I also happen to know that the government has gone out of its way to try to mislead people about this.
How so?
And they have muddied the waters, so to speak, in certain areas where they know a lot of mutilations are going on, and government helicopters will show up, and they'll try to monitor it. They also will try to leave bits and pieces of evidence to indicate that there's a government agency involved here. I think initially the thing is an alien survey, a tissue and blood analysis of some kind. I don't know what the motives and purposes are, but law enforcement and military guys have got evidence that this is an alien matter. They've been photographed on the scene. I have photographs in my files.
Of what?
From law enforcement officers and military people who've been out on the scene, and the UFOs come down, aliens get out, and they do take these samples from the cattle. So the government's tried in a couple of issues. They've even had a movie out on the issue here some time back, to kind of lead people off in the wrong direction, indicating that, well, it's probably a secret government agency, and we're up to some good work here. We just can't tell you about it right now.
No, if it were satanic, someone by now would have been arrested, suspected, prosecuted, and so far to date on the cattle mutilation issue, there have been no prosecutions.
Good question, and thanks for asking that one, Chris. Justin next, calling from KXL in Portland, Oregon. Hi.
Hi, Laura Lee. I got two things here. I'm moving to Florida next week, and I was wondering, can I pick you up out there?
We just signed on with WJNO in West Palm Beach, and they'll be joining us. In fact, they're joining us tonight. That's right. We've got two new stations, WJNO, West Palm Beach. Want to welcome you all, and KQQQ in Pullman. And we're adding stations all the time. We're up to 28 now.
Okay, great.
So stay in touch with our offices.
And I had another sort of a different spin on this. I'm really getting appalled by a lot of people who, I guess you'd say, believe in the UFO phenomena as a divine kind of thing. I want to get a spin on this and see, what do you think that, just because they're not coming down on the White House lawn and blasting the heck out of us doesn't mean that their nature is divine.
Exactly. Good point. We'll pick that. Bob and Cecilia Dean, longtime UFO researchers, they take a refreshingly positive point of view. But as our last caller, Justin, was pointing out there, Bob, he's getting a little bit upset with people saying, oh, they're higher tech. They know more than us. These UFOs must be divine beings. I'm going, I don't think so. Just because you're technically proficient doesn't mean you're spiritually wise. And also, we have been talking about this soul component to this whole thing, the whole UFO and larger, a change in our psychology, our theology, to realize that we're dealing with higher dimensions here. When you say higher dimensions, you automatically think divine. What's the story here? How do you see it?
Well, all I can do is tell you what I've concluded after a number of years of research. We're dealing with a great number of intelligences out there. Some of them are not far beyond ours on this planet here. Some of them are really not that advanced. And being advanced technologically does not necessarily mean they're advanced spiritually. Apparently, the universe is literally teeming with intelligent life of all kinds, of all levels.
I would expect
good ones
no
and
less.
bad ones. It's very much like what we have here on this planet. We have good people, we have bad people. And we have some that are a little bit of both.
And some that are just confused.
We have people out there, we have contacts that we've had, definitely, we know about, with intelligences that may not necessarily be malevolent or hostile, but they don't much seem to care for the human race. And there have been many
Guess we're
contacts.
an acquired taste.
They seem to look down on us. They look upon us as a unevolved species. They look upon us as like we might look upon savages running around in the jungles of Africa or New Guinea. And it's not that they detest us or hate us or are particularly malevolent. They just don't seem to care very much. And some of them are not very nice. And we have evidence about that. So I tell you that not all of them out there are divine and advanced spiritually and loving and caring.
You know, where in all this is room for authentic mystical beings? And why would a truly mystical being need a UFO to run around in as a vehicle? I keep wondering about that.
These advanced intelligences, these multidimensional beings, do not need vehicles to go any place in.
That would be the hallmark. If your
Right.
consciousness is so expanded that it's very wide bandwidth, you don't need a little saucer
Exactly.
to spin around the block in. Okay. And let's go next to the telephone and talk with John in Black Diamond, Washington, listening to KVI. Hi, John.
First of all, I'm pulling. I think it's like anything else. It's a lot of different things, and my own spirituality has taken a quantum leap in this last week. And the UFOs, which I used to worry about a lot, just I really want to know, have fallen right in nicely into this paradigm. That's not what I want to talk about. Comment about your entertainment discussion earlier, and then a question. First of all, has anybody seen the Disney production of Alien Encounters on Channel 22 tonight? Here's Robert Urey, who also incidentally starred in a movie about cattle mutilations back in the 70s or 80s in big black helicopters, was the host of it. The CEO of Disney came out at the start of it with these fake soldiers around him like he's standing in front. Anyway, what I'm saying is the whole theme of the show was that they're coming. We've got this ride down in Disneyland here to prepare you for it, in New Tomorrowland.
Well, Disney's part of the entertainment industry.
Exactly, and they're not talking alleged or reported. They're saying this is what's happening. These are coming. They've been here, and the government's going to be. The rumor has it the government's going to be releasing this information within the next 5 years or so. Now,
I get a call from Vogue magazine, and they're saying, we're writing a story on the spiritual renaissance that's going on. Would you like to contribute to this? Sure. Vogue magazine, I thought, from fashion to spirituality. That's a transition. Anyway, go ahead, John.
The whole flavor of the whole thing was, and I've seen, encounter sightings. I've seen a whole bunch of these, like all of us folks that are into this. And I've never seen one that just came right out and made it sound like, it's happening right now. And I figured, well, CEO, Disney, they've been plugged in with the government since World War II at least, propaganda films for the war, so on. So on. So I'm saying here's a big gun in the industry who's probably got some connections, who's coming out and saying this. So that the warp might continue a bit. And then one other comment, and then I'll just listen to you. The other thing that collapsed a wormhole for me this weekend was a tape I saw called Nazi UFOs, The Third Reich Strikes Back, German Knights Templars, and the Thule Secret Societies.
Oh.
Have you ever seen that, sir, or madams, ladies? And whatever comments you might have, I'd just be eager as all heck to listen to. Thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you, John.
Yeah, right up your alley, dear.
Well,
Thulle.
Thule, I believe.
L-E, okay.
And the Knights Templars, an organization that I have a great admiration and respect for, because they're basically focused on the spiritual issue, are alive and well. And indeed, there's a lot of evidence that the Third Reich, before it collapsed, was literally building and flying UFOs, flying discs, flying saucers.
I've heard that from a number of sources.
The evidence is pretty clear on that thing. Now, I try not to look at all of these organizations and all of these efforts as dangerous necessarily. I have a great respect for the Knights Templars. But the Tulip Society is still alive and well, and it was focused primarily on support of the Nazi Party during the last war. What can I say here other than these organizations exist, but I don't think they're a threat.
Let him continue with this question.
Yeah, I'm sorry I interrupted here.
Actually, John signed off. He said he just wanted to pose the question, get your marks. So let's move on. Let's talk next to Iona. Hi. Hello, Iona. Let's try Wayne, calling from KQMS in Redding, California. Hi there.
Hello.
Hi. Thanks for calling in.
I was just had one question concerning, societal, how they're going to view a landing or a contact of some sort. We've talked on an individual basis. How do you think on a societal basis, do you think they will react? I mean, economically, governments, do you think governments collapse? Do you think the stronger governments will just take over littler governments? How do you foresee that happening?
I think society's going to be able to deal with the overt reality of alien intelligence. I think the fact that when this whole story does come out, though, that it's going to have an impact on the world economy, I think you're going to see the stock market do all kinds of incredible things. I think the fact that this involvement with alien intelligence is going to literally probably revolutionize our energy sources. There's going to be some amazing impact here, I'm afraid, if people aren't prepared for it.
You were mentioning an event. Hold on. You were mentioning an event that was going to happen in 4 or 5 years. What do you think that event is going to be? Or is it going to be a series of events? Or is it just going to be the build-up of events such as it's going to be harder and harder to deny and suppress?
I've been monitoring the alien agenda, what I call it, for many, many years, and it's dawned on me that they do have a program. It's very clear that there is a developing, ongoing program to make us aware of their existence. I think we're going to see more overt mass flyovers and perhaps mass landings in the next couple of years. All of the events that occurred over the Hudson Valley a few years ago involving those gigantic triangular objects, there were hundreds of them. Hundreds of thousands of people were involved in that. These big triangular-shaped objects were massive. They were hovering over the Hudson Valley, over the nuclear plants, over the freeways. People were stopping by the hundreds, getting out of their cars and looking up. That same kind of a flap happened in Belgium a couple of years ago. I think you're going to see more and more and more of that, but I think you're going to see it during the day.
Now, why? Why would the
I think that the alien agenda is designed to inculcate, educate us in a way that's non-threatening and non-frightening. And I think their exposure.
Go ahead, Wade.
Do you think there will be one particular event that will shape the way they look at it, or the way society, do you think there will be one event that society is going to step back and go, okay, now what?
Well, I hate to predict, Wayne, but I can tell you I suspect there will be an event that will be on the evening news within the next 6 to 8 months. I suspect there's going to be some sightings that are going to be so overt that there's no way anybody's going to explain them away. And they're going to be on the evening news, and you're going to have Brokaw and Rather making comments about it. And that in itself is going to bring about some change.
That'll be fun. I'm going to see that. Why 6 to 8 months? Just a feeling?
Just a gut feeling, yeah.
Okay.
I've been watching this for over 30 years, and I think that it's going to be building very soon.
Cecilia, you had a comment.
Yes, I just wanted to respond to the fact that, indeed, through our sociological history, we have seen a pattern of high-tech civilizations taking over the more primitive societies. And I think that could easily be true again, now.
They irrefutably changed them, I know Margaret Mead had said.
Yes, So the point that I wanted to make is that it doesn't have to happen again. We can take control of how much of our own civilization, how much of our own traditions, how much of our Earth culture we want to keep, but we have to be awake for this transition in order to do that.
There's a brilliant writer in New Mexico, if I may, Laura, a fellow by the name of Neil Freer.
Oh, I've had Neil on the show.
Neil is brilliant. I have a great respect for him. He's written an outstanding book called Breaking the Godspell. And Neil talks about developing a sense of unassailable integrity. Know who we are, know what we are, develop a sense of integrity and understanding that we do have power. We do have meaning. There's a value to us. We're not victims. We don't have to even think of ourselves as victims. I think that's crucial here in this developing phenomenon that's going to bring this paradigm shift into being.
We have hours and hours on tape of Neil Freer in our catalog available. We should get his book as well. One last question. Let's see, you need to take a break first, and we'll come right back to more questions, faxes to read, and more discussion with Bob and Cecilia Dean right here on The Laura Lee Show. Hi, this is Laura. Next up, Ken Carey. After that, Sean David Morton. It'll be a fun evening tonight. Let's talk next to Mary calling in from Woodinville, Washington on her own dime. Hi, Mary.
Hi, Laura Lee. I enjoy your show, and I would like to ask the guest if he knows anything about the Illuminati. And another thing I'd like to say is Jesus is King, and Jesus is our Savior and my Savior. Thank you. I'll take it on the air.
Thank you, Mary, for that.
Some of these questions are really loaded here, I must say. These questions are incredible. The Illuminati, as you probably know, is an ancient organization that has been referred to and does indeed exist. It refers to the illuminated ones, the enlightened ones, and they've been with us for several thousands of years, I'm afraid. I do not look upon them as a threat. I don't look upon them in a dread kind of way. I don't think they have the kind of power that people assume that they might have. But they do exist, and they've always been around.
What's their agenda? Just briefly.
Well, originally the agenda was benevolent. The agenda was world peace and order and stability. And I think essentially that that's still what their focus is. But people today have begun to think about the Illuminati as this, what do they call it, the New World Order? That the Illuminati is orchestrating this, and that it's not going to be constitutional at all. It's going to be kind of like a Third Reich or Fourth Reich and a fascist state. I don't buy that. I don't buy into the threat of the Illuminati. And then you mentioned Jesus, and I was born and raised a Christian, and I'm still a Christian. And I think that the carpenter from Galilee never ever lied to us about a thing.
Same here, I believe.
And I simply look upon him as a great being who incarnated into this world by the will of God to come and teach us. And sadly enough, we never listened to what he had to say. We really never paid attention to what he was talking about. And I think essentially what he was talking about initially was this spiritual thing, this fact that we are all children of God. And that, to me, transcends religion. It goes beyond religion. I think that if we ever really understood what he meant and what he talked about and what he tried to communicate to us, we would go beyond Islam, Christianity, Buddhism, Hinduism, because he never ever, from what I understood, tried to establish an organized church. That was done later by human beings. But I believe in Jesus. I follow him. I try to pattern my life after him.
Thank you, Bob. Frank next, calling from KXL Portland. Hello, Frank.
Hello, Laura.
Got to keep this one brief.
Yes, it will be very brief. I would just like to ask your guest if he has had an encounter of the third kind.
Oh, good question.
Oh, my.
Have you had any direct communication with whom you believe is an alien life form?
Yes, I do. And yes, I have. I don't know how much time we have to go into this.
A few minutes.
I've had several experiences in my life where I think I've been face-to-face and had conversations with, well, I don't like the word alien. It just doesn't seem to apply. I mean, who are the aliens here, us or them?
All of the above.
The point I'm making is that I've been visited a number of times professionally. I've had experiences in my life where I have encountered individuals who I really did feel were probably from somewhere else. Where they were from and any of that, I couldn't begin to tell you. But they were human. They looked just like we do.
Maybe to answer that question, we need to answer, where are we from?
Exactly. Oh, boy, that's the biggest thing of all. We are seated here, you know. The human race is a product. We are a created race. And I believe that in my heart. I think the evidence is overwhelming. We've been seated on this planet by advanced intelligence. I believe we have been genetically manipulated on this planet by advanced intelligence.
But you know, what people are talking about are just vehicles, bodies. What about our eternal soul? If what ancient wisdom is saying is true, and Jesus was saying was true, and all the religions are saying true, we're eternal souls. So this is just one stop in a very long sojourn of traipsing around the galaxy, the universe, and other dimensions, learning what we can learn, and going to various classroom to classroom, and having all these wonderful adventures.
Laura, we're immortal beings. We really are infinite beings, and we need to come to terms with that and understand what that means.
And our next guest, Ken Carey, says that consciousness is not a fixed commodity. Let's look at it as a fluid state.
Exactly.
And this is just one point in the timeline, in time and space, in a very long book. One page in a very big book.
I admire Ken's work. I agree with him.
And the genetic manipulation that we've been talking about has to do with developing an envelope. A
virtual reality machine called the physical body.
Right.
Yeah.
For this wonderful consciousness. The more highly developed the envelope is, then the greater the experience that soul life is going to have. And so you can't exclude the genetics part of it.
It's kind of like going to another planet and say, well, what do we need here to sit on the surface and go through a few incarnations? Well, you need a physical body that's adapted to it. Maybe the vehicle that they arrived in isn't suited. It's got to be adapted to its environment.
That's right. And so we're becoming more and more genetically improved. And I think for a very wonderful reason.
If you'd put an advanced spiritual awareness inside of an old Australopithecus or a Neanderthal, it would have been tragic. It would have been tragic. And I think a new form is being created even as we speak for the next generation and the next world.
Well, we have a very interesting radio receiver transmitter called our mind. And I think as we open that and get more and more of the signal out there, more play, more bandwidth, we're going to see some very interesting. It's going to up the adventure quotient. We'll be right back on the Laura Lee Show with Bob and Cecilia Dean.
This is Hot Talk.
So I want to read on the air, and we've got 3 phone calls that are next to take. And then we're going to stop the phone calls so we can get through the faxes and also ask you about the beautiful lady myth, which we've been promising our listeners all night. And then that'll take up the rest of our half hour that's left with Bob and Cecilia. Next hour, Ken Carey. After that, I've done a little homework on Frank's comments from last Saturday I want to share with you. And then Sean David Morton will be with us. And that's our lineup for tonight. And let me take the next call. That would be Mickey. Hi, Mickey. Thanks for joining us.
Hi there. I was wondering what your theory is on the so-called crop circles.
Do you think crop circles are real, Bob and Cecilia?
Oh, no question about it.
You know what's interesting is a friend of mine was in England. He said that they're showing up at the rate of about 11 a day when he was there. That was last summer. And the government of England is paying the farmers to plow them under. So it's rare even to get the photographs. Anyway, next question.
Well, how are they done?
Oh, my. I'm not sure we can even begin to understand how they do them.
Well,
there's a process, an electromagnetic process at work, because some of my friends over there who've been studying these for some years have detected enormous energies at work over there in those fields.
Well, I have a feeling it's done from a distance, a great distance.
Well, you know, they've seen a lot of UFOs in those areas where the circles appear. And a couple of cases, they've seen the UFOs departing, apparently, right after the circle was created.
Yeah, who knows?
Yeah.
Thank you for that, Mickey. Appreciate the call. Next, we have Scott calling from KXL Portland. Hello, Scott.
Hi, Laura.
Hi there.
You sure have a terrific show.
Thank you.
I'm mid-40s, blue collar, and I just wish that your show was on earlier so I could listen to it more often. I think the subjects that you...
Hey, you're lucky. You're in the Pacific time zone there, buddy. Look at all our East Coast people. It's midnight when the show starts for them.
I am very lucky that way.
Yeah. Anyway, go ahead.
I was just curious to ask of your guests a couple of things. The first of which being how many civilizations they think have attempted or have made appearances here, and do they have any way to speculate, which this is quite a stretch, I'm sure, about where those civilizations might be coming from?
Well, that's a good question. In 1976, when I left the service, we knew of 4 different groups. I've been told by old friends of mine who are still working in government agencies that there's well over a dozen now that they know of, and I've even heard estimates that there could be as many as over 100. I'm not sure we will really ever know. Maybe in the years ahead we might. But we're dealing with a vast number of different civilizations and cultures and societies and races out there. And coming to terms with where they're from, my God.
Are most of them humanoid? Because a lot of people
no, not all of them. No, that's not a final answer, Laura, because we have seen some that do not appear humanoid at all.
What kind of diversity and manifestations have we chronicled so far?
Oh, my.
Good one.
Well, we've encountered reptilians. We've encountered little grays, large grays. We've encountered enormous white-skinned humanoids with no hair.
What? Enormous meaning how big?
I'm sorry?
Enormous meaning how big?
Oh, my. When I say enormous?
Yeah.
8, 9 feet.
Okay, no hair. And what else?
No hair. And there have been little tiny creatures have been seen coming out of some of these ships.
Okay, how
There
small?
have been creatures that have appeared that do not appear humanoid. They look like little animals of some kind.
Huh. Furry?
Yeah. You know, Laura, we don't have the time, frankly, to go into all of this.
But I've never heard any of this
It's an
before.
excellent
This is new
question.
info.
And I'm going to try to cover as much of this in my book as I can. But
Now tell them about the praying mantis type as well.
Oh, we've heard
Oh,
about
my.
those. Whitley Schreiber writes about those.
well, there is one group that we've had an ongoing relationship with, apparently, very extremely advanced intelligence that looked like large praying mantises.
And they wear robes, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Insectoid, I think.
Now,
is
this
the term
is
that's
a bit
used.
of a shock to people when they encounter these individuals, but they also have an overwhelming sense that these particular intelligences are very, very gentle, loving, intelligent, and
Don't judge
caring.
it by its cover.
Kind of a benevolence about them.
Of the percentage that we've encountered, which percentage would you say is benevolent? I mean, is there some way to evaluate?
Well, it's just a rough guess. I would say roughly that, of my knowledge, about 3/4 of those we've encountered have appeared to be caring, benevolent, non-threatening in that sense.
When you had your own close encounter, with whom was it with?
Humanoids.
Humanoids.
Humans, yeah. I've had them visit me in my office in secure areas where they couldn't possibly have gotten in.
They just kind of show up.
And they just showed up.
And did they look like humans, or did they look enough different that you knew, here was an
one
alien?
chap came in and sat down in my office in Tucson, Arizona when I worked for the Sheriff's Department, spent almost an hour with me, asking me about my opinion on the UFO matter. We chatted pleasantly for damn near an hour. He got up to leave. I forgot to ask his name and where he was from, and I jumped out of my chair, went to the door, and he was gone. The security people
Now that's a disappearing act.
The security people downstairs said no one had come in. You couldn't even get into the building without giving your driver's license and signing in and getting a pass. And I'm chatting with this chap for almost an hour. And I assumed after that he was one of our visitors.
Beam in, beam out.
Yeah. It's kind of a shock when you sit there and realize that you've been visited by somebody who apparently didn't come in the front door.
Well, you could say, so that's an alien. No sweat. Bring on the next one. Thank you for the comment, Scott. Did you get all your questions asked?
I'm sure I would have 1,000 more if we had time, but thank you very much, Laura.
I appreciate your call. Maria calling next from KQMS, Redding, California. Hi, Maria.
Hello, Laura. This is the nice and polite show that I have ever heard, unlike the others.
Because I'm a lady.
Listen, I have something real strange. that has happened to us, and I never heard it anywhere, and probably there must be somebody there. It's about computers. We have in the office computer, comes in, it plays the music of Close Encounters in the middle of something very critical, breaks off all the whatever is happening, and the computer is not connected to anything. It's a security computer, and every day the security is changed. So it's not that it's connected to all these others. It's by itself. Okay? So plays the music. It's been going on for 3 years. Then it's the first time it told us something, a message to us that only we know that name. Mm-hmm. Nobody else does. Then talks about music boxes and UFOs. Very strange message. And then, this was in English, but then it starts talking about jibber jabber. We don't understand what it is. Then finally, about a couple of months ago, came a barcode. Something that looks like a barcode. I tried to shrink it and run it through the grocery store. I don't know what else to do. It doesn't read. Okay? Then the last one, about a couple of days ago, something that sounds like looks like a seismic, like needles going, like an earthquake, like something like that. Now, Harley Bird was over our house one time, and he looked at one of those little messages. My husband didn't let me show him everything, and he says, "Oh, they want you. They want you to go to Virginia, and they want me to have babies." I thought this was outrageous. So, I mean, I don't know what to think about the whole thing. Any idea?
I'm kind of disappointed in my computer, but go ahead.
Maria, where do you work?
I don't. This is our own business.
Oh, this is at your own personal business?
Yes.
Fascinating.
And I know nothing about computers, okay? But like the last one, it broke off for the first time. It broke off the transmission of a fact. And then the music comes in first, like do-do-do-do-do, like that. And my husband didn't even know what it was the first time. And I said, "Oh, my goodness, this is the music of Close Encounters." He never saw the movie.
I'd aim a video camera at that computer and watch it and document this.
You bet. Record this.
Yeah. Oh, it's recorded. It turns off the printer by itself. It does.
You ought to send a copy of this to Laura here and let her take a look at it.
I have it. I'm so afraid to show it. I haven't told anyone. Of course, I'm on the radio right now, but I hope nobody knows.
You're sharing it with a few people there, Maria. Gosh.
But can you imagine? And what about the barcode? It looks like a barcode.
God, I'd like to see
Huge.
it.
I mean, in a whole page. And then, I guess, and we didn't enter the other one. And he said, a Harley Bird told me they wanted to capture me. And then when I put up such a fight, I said, "No way, they're not going to capture me." I don't know if I believe it, okay? Then we got the message.
Any comments?
Well,
guys?
Maria, I just want to congratulate you on having your very own personal psychic computer.
Tell you what, Maria, let's put you on hold and Paul can get your number down and maybe we could find out more about this and do a little more research. We're kind of limited on time right now, but thank you for an extraordinary story.
You're going to call me, you say?
Yeah, we're going to put you on hold. Paul's going to talk to you next, my husband. Okay?
Okay.
And let's take our next caller, Scott, calling from Utah, listening to KCNR, Salt Lake City.
Hi, Laura.
Hi, Scott.
How are you?
Good.
Hey, I came into this conversation partway through it, obviously.
Oh, you missed a good one. Go ahead.
The question that I had, I kept hearing reference to people changing their belief systems when finally all this, when they start making appearances, the aliens and et cetera.
How intact is your own? Are you doing okay?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, good.
I guess the thing that I was wondering was what's the, I guess that's based upon the idea that if we find out there are aliens, all of a sudden that's going to make people stop believing in God. Is that the idea, or what's the notion there?
No, that wasn't voiced during this show.
Well, I guess I'm just wondering what the inference was. It seemed like the theological belief system was going to change dramatically.
Oh, I think it will change dramatically, but it's not going to affect our belief in a divinity at all. Matter of fact, I think it's going to strengthen it.
Yeah.
I do too.
Okay. Well, then, like I said, I came in partway through, and it struck me that way, and I was like, I had the question.
Conversation. Oh, go ahead. Let's hear your question.
Well, that was it. I mean, I was wondering how you got from all of a sudden, we know now we see there are aliens, and now all of a sudden, why is there a major shift in theology?
Okay. Well,
because that seems to fit fairly well within my my belief system.
There's going to be
There
an
might be aliens.
expansion of consciousness, in my opinion, that's going to be extremely beneficial for the human race. I think we're going to, by the very nature of accepting the reality that we're not alone and we've never been alone, that in itself is going to bring in an expansion of awareness and consciousness that I think is going to affect us in a spiritual way.
Here's our conversation. Bob was saying that from his 30 years research in Cecilia with her research into trauma, that Bob was saying we're going to discover once the lid is off of the whole UFO business, it's not just interplanetary, it's not interstellar, it's not intergalactic, it's all that, but also higher dimensions, other dimensions. And I said, so what's the big deal? We're all ready for it. And we put it to the test to listen to our callers and our listeners and hear their opinions and kind of put the finger to the wind and see, hey, we're all ready for it, no problem.
Sure, it seems like government generally wants to...
Hey, they're the last to realize
shove
what's
us all
going
into
on.
a category of a bunch of dumb people that just keep them in the dark and they won't know any different.
They continually underestimate your intelligence.
Sure.
Yes,
I think we've seen that millions of times.
Oh, you bet.
Yep.
Well, thanks.
Thank you, and thanks for finding the show. We're going to take a break. We're going to come back. We're going to read all the many faxes that have come in. We're going to get your comments on the beautiful lady myths, and we'll do all that coming up right here in the Laura Lee Show. I'm Laura Lee.
There's a long and fascinating...
Newest paranormal activity for about 4 years now, often strongly inclined to ET activity happening in this area in many ways that I've never heard described by anyone. In attempts to share that experience with others that claim expertise in the field, I've met with very closed ears and minds. Often the so-called experts seem to have difficulty even being able to hear anything that does not fit within their expectations, desires, or past documentation. New things are happening, and even many of the self-proclaimed experts, from my observation, are in for quite a major shock to their foundations of belief. Tom Thompson, Camino Island, Washington. Nodding their head, they are. And a question, Bob, have you ever thought of us humans from the future? Have you ever thought it is us humans from the future coming back viewing our own history, etc.? Interesting. What about that?
That's a fascinating question, and yes, I have thought about that. When we learned that some of our more advanced beings apparently are able to literally manipulate time, and boy, what a shock that was to some of our scientists.
Uh-huh.
So if they can travel in time, why couldn't some of our descendants be dropping back to visit us? It's quite possible.
Another fact, dear Laura and guests, given the relative fragility of the interconnectedness of human life on this planet and the tremendous diversity of both belief and level of education and understanding, isn't it likely that exactly what governments fear would in fact happen? If a single legal decision or a soccer match or an election can create riots, confusion, or, as you say, a cataclysmic paradigm shift. Well, I don't know if a soccer match can create a paradigm shift. Then it leads to these questions. How should it be done? Who should release it? How can it be made comprehensible to those cultures whose average education level is much lower than ours? How would we prevent the massive chaos and social and economic travail that would surely follow the official recognition of these ideas? Patrick and Kimberly Robinson.
It's an excellent question again, and I think that the answer is education and preparation.
And education on a gradual level.
I'm sorry, Paul, you're not doing your job here, buddy.
And I mentioned that the education has to be done on a gradual level, just like education is dispensed to us now, level by level. You go to your elementary grades, and then you go to your secondary grades, and so on. It has to be built upon itself in that manner.
And another fax from Bill in Monroe, Washington. Have the world leaders been mandated to form a one-world government by the year 2000, in your opinion, Bob?
Oh, boy, you have some fine questions coming in here. I don't know whether the world leaders have been mandated, but I know the world leaders have been contacted. I know that. If you think for a moment that the collapse of the Soviet Union and the establishment... Yeah, no, that's no accident. And the establishment of a black government in Africa, and the fact that the PLO and the Israelis are talking and hugging and kissing each other now, you think any of that's an accident? No way. That's a result of the fact that some of our visitors have communicated with our world leaders on a number of levels.
Let's see. Beautiful lady myth. You've been following this. What's your interest? What did you find? And what does it all mean? We have about 8 minutes.
Well, when I began to try to make some sense out of this, Laura, many years ago, I did some research in history, not only in philosophy, but in theology as well. And it dawned on me that this was a vast panorama of phenomena.
Radio that does that.
Yes, excuse me. And I was fascinated by the recurring legend and myth of the beautiful lady that keeps appearing again and again and again around the world. Christians call her Maria, the Mother of Christ. Other groups call her different names. The lady has appeared repeatedly since the beginning of our history, long before Christianity was established. And I think that this beautiful lady is an extraterrestrial intelligence, a manifestation of the feminine that has been interrelating with us from the beginning of our history. And it's part of this ongoing growth and development and spiritual awareness that we've been having underway for a long, long time.
I didn't know you were going to connect this to ETs.
The lady, appeared in Mexico in the 16th century. They called her the Lady of Guadalupe. She looked like an Aztec princess, frankly. And she spoke in Aztec to Juan Diego. The beautiful lady has appeared in Portugal at Fatima. The beautiful lady has appeared all over the world. And she was noted and had appeared before Christian times in the ancient world. The Greeks, the Romans, the Sumerians knew of and respected the beautiful lady. She was a feminine manifestation of intelligence, and I've always kind of had a love affair with the beautiful lady.
What about all the pre-written history of humankind where they go back and they find all these female form in effigies, and they call this the goddess religion is the general term.
Exactly. In our ancient world, we were really a matriarchy. Back in the ancient Mediterranean.
No, those were the good old days.
Yes, right.
Yeah. Well, I believe to some degree you're right.
Here, Bob.
No, I agree with you. I think that maybe we need to get back to that. I think that this modern world needs to rediscover the goddess. I'm an admirer of Robert Graves' work, and I have always admired his work. And I think we need to rediscover the feminine. We need to learn to respect it and worship it again. I think the balance will bring about this kind of incredible change in human consciousness.
Are you saying that you advocate that for men too?
I abdicate it for all of us. Yes, indeed.
It's not a female-male thing. It's an attitude thing. It's a
principle.
Principle,
Yes.
exactly.
I've loved the feminine all my life. I know that I am incomplete without that.
There's many ways to appreciate the feminine and to express that. Let's see, and we've got 2 minutes left, and in that time I want to say thank you so very much for joining us. It's been a real treat to have you here, not just on the show, but in studio. It's always much more fun. And you have a couple of announcements, Cecilia.
Yes, I do, and thank you for giving me a moment here. I just want to remind everyone in your listening audience that Operation Right to Know, which may be an organization that you already know about, is sponsoring a demonstration this month, March the 29th, Washington, D.C., at the General Accounting Office, and this is in support of Congressman Schiff.
Okay.
And the Roswell UFO Initiative. The demonstration, as I said, is scheduled for March the 29th, and it's at 12 noon. The rally is for the entire afternoon, and the General Accounting Office is 441 G Street at 4th Northwest, Washington, D.C. So be there if you can.
And tell you what, if you want this flyer that Cecilia has that has all this information, send me a self-addressed stamped envelope, and I will ship this out to you immediately upon receipt of your letter with an SASE in it, and we'll include Bob's book list as well, and information about your video.
And if you can't be there, Laura, at least they should send their support. Call their congressman or
I just had a station in Washington, D.C. that just called me up the other day and said, hey, we want your show. So when we get that confirmation, we'll release that, and we can talk more
Let's
about
rattle
that.
the government cages a bit.
I also wanted to briefly mention that there is now a UFO hotline. It comes out of California. The UFO hotline is a 900 number, and one of their new speakers on the hotline is Robert Dean.
What's the 900 number?
900-329-UFOs.
900-329-UFOs. And if you want to send correspondence to this show, we'll pass it on to Bob and Cecilia Dean if that's for them. And also if you want to send in your SASE, it's P.O. Box 30